Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Salem Witch Hangings. Picture the Salem witch trials of 1692. It's one of the darkest chapters in American history. In your mind's eye, you probably see a terrified woman, falsely accused, being tied to a wooden stake, as townspeople pile firewood at her feet. The image of witch burning is powerful, iconic, and completely burned into our collective memory. The only thing is, for the Salem trials, it's wrong. Not a single witch was burned at the stake in Salem, Massachusetts. The actual method of execution was far more mundane, but no less horrific hanging. 19 men and women were sent to the gallows. Another man, Giles Corey, was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea. So where does the fiery imagery come from? It's a geographical mix-up. Burning at the stake was a common method for executing heretics and accused witches in Europe during the Inquisition, centuries before Salem. Over time, pop culture and lazy storytelling just mashed the European method together with the famous American event, creating a historical supergroup of horror that never actually performed together. It's a grim detail to get wrong, but it's a perfect example of how our brains prefer the most dramatic version of a story, even if it means ignoring the fine print of history. The truth is often less cinematic. Number 9. Einstein, the math whiz. Here's a piece of trivia you've probably heard a dozen times. It's meant to be inspiring, a little boost for anyone who's ever struggled in school. Even Albert Einstein failed math class as a kid. It's the ultimate story of a late bloomer. Proof that a rough start doesn't prevent you from changing the world. It's a tale so perfect for motivational posters that it just has to be true. Right, wrong. The truth is, Einstein was a certified prodigy. He was so brilliant at math from a young age that he found his regular schooling boring. He had mastered both differential and integral calculus by the age of 15. The myth seems to have started from a simple misunderstanding. While briefly attending a school in Germany, the grading system was reversed, making a 1 the highest score and a 6 the lowest. Years later, a biographer or reporter saw a 6 on an old report card, and, not understanding the context, created the Einstein failed story. The man himself was even asked about it once and just laughed, saying, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus. We just love the idea that geniuses are flawed like us. But sometimes, they're just on a completely different planet." Number 8. The pirate booty that never was. What's the first thing you think of when you hear the word pirate, besides the eye patch and the parrot? It's probably a treasure map. A weathered piece of parchment with a dotted line leading to a big red X that marks the spot, where a chest overflowing with gold coins is buried. This trope is the entire foundation of our pirate fantasies, from Peter Pan to Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a shame it's almost entirely made up. The vast majority of pirates never buried their treasure. It just wasn't practical. Think about it, pirates were thieves, not financial planners. Most pirate hauls weren't chests of gold doubloons anyway. They were perishable goods like food, cloth, spices, or alcohol. The money they did steal was typically divided among the crew as soon as they reached a friendly port, where it was immediately spent on women, gambling, and a catastrophic amount of rum. The entire idea of buried treasure comes from just 1 or 2 real-life, highly publicized exceptions, like Captain Kidd. But the man who really cemented the myth was author Robert Louis Stevenson. His 1883 novel, Treasure Island, was so incredibly popular that its plot became the default template for all pirate stories forever. The reality is much less romantic. The only treasure most pirates cared about was the kind you could drink. Number 7. Marie Antoinette, the accidental baker. Let them eat cake. It is arguably the most famous quote ever attributed to a clueless monarch. It perfectly captures the image of Marie Antoinette, a frivolous, pampered queen, so disconnected from the suffering of her starving people that she offers a flippant, impossible solution. The line is so good, so damning, that it became a rallying cry for the French Revolution. The only problem, she never said it. There is zero credible evidence linking her to that phrase. In fact, the story was a piece of anti-aristocratic propaganda that existed years before Marie ever came into the public spotlight. The phrase first appeared in the writings of the philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but when the revolution needed a villain, Marie Antoinette was the perfect target. She was foreign, she was known for her extravagant lifestyle, and the public already hated her. Pinning the quote on her was the final nail in her public relations coffin. It just goes to show, you should never let the facts get in the way of a good story, especially when there's a guillotine waiting. Number 6. The awkward dinner party, known as Thanksgiving. Every child in America learns the story of the first Thanksgiving, It's a heartwarming tale of friendship and cultural exchange. You have the pious, black-hatted pilgrims and the noble, feathered Native Americans, all sitting down together for a harmonious feast in 1621. This sanitized, storybook version is, to put it mildly, a work of fiction. First off, the Pilgrims were desperate survivors who had previously robbed Native American graves and storage pits to get corn. The Wampanoag tribe, led by their chief Massasoit, didn't just get an invitation and show up with a casserole. They showed up with 90 of their best warriors, because they heard celebratory gunfire from the Pilgrim settlement and thought they were being attacked. The ensuing 3-day event wasn't a feast of friendship. It was a tense diplomatic negotiation. This so-called peace barely lasted a generation before being shattered by brutal conflict like King Philip's War. The first Thanksgiving was less a holiday special and more like that awkward family dinner, where everyone is smiling, but they all secretly want to kill each other. Number 5. The Napoleon complex was a hoax. Napoleon Bonaparte, the military genius, the Emperor of France, the angry little man. The idea of the Napoleon complex is a household term. We picture him stomping around, hand tucked in his waistcoat, furious at the world for making him fun-sized. And it's almost entirely based on a lie. Napoleon wasn't even short. He was about 5 feet 6 or 5 feet 7 inches tall, which was actually slightly above average for a Frenchman in the early 19th century. So how did he get branded as a pipsqueak first brilliant enemy propaganda? The British loved depicting him as a comically tiny, tantrum-throwing tyrant named Little Boney. Second was a simple case of being lost in translation. His height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches in French units, but the French inch was longer than the British inch. He also surrounded himself with his imperial guard, who were all required to be tall, making him look shorter by comparison. It just goes to show. A good smear campaign can literally cut a guy down to size for centuries. Number 4. The 300 who weren't alone. Close your eyes and picture the Battle of Thermopylae. 300 chiseled Spartan warriors, their red capes flowing, making the most glorious last stand in history. The only problem is, it's a little too perfect. The truth is, the 300 Spartans weren't alone. Historians estimate the total Greek force was actually somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 soldiers. So why do we only hear about the 300? Because the Spartans had the best PR machine in the ancient world. They were masters of branding. Most of the other allies did retreat, but the 700 Thespians chose to stay and fight to the death alongside the Spartans. A detail Hollywood seemed to accidentally forget. So next time you watch that movie, pour one out for the other few thousand guys who were there. They may not have had movie-quality abs, but they deserved more than a historical footnote. Number 3. The Round Earth Conspiracy of 500 BC. We all know the story of Christopher Columbus, a brave, forward-thinking visionary, standing before the Spanish court, trying to convince a bunch of superstitious, flat earth-believing nobles that the world is round. It is also completely false. Educated people in Europe have known the earth was a sphere since the time of the ancient Greeks, around 500 BC. The actual debate Columbus had with the Spanish court wasn't about the earth's shape, but its size. Columbus had wildly, dangerously miscalculated the earth's circumference. The Spanish experts correctly argued that his math was wrong and the ocean was far too big to cross. They were right. The only thing they didn't know was that a whole other continent was sitting in the middle of the ocean. The myth of a flat earth past was largely invented by 19th century writers, who wanted to make their own era seem more enlightened by painting the Middle Ages as a time of utter ignorance. Columbus wasn't a hero fighting stupidity. He was a guy with bad math who got incredibly lucky. Number 2. Washington's wooden teeth and wooden lies. I cannot tell a lie. A young George chops down his father's prized cherry tree with a new hatchet. When confronted, he bravely fesses up, and it was completely made up. The story was invented from thin air by one of Washington's first biographers, Mason Locke Weems, who wanted to make Washington seem saintly. So he just wrote fan fiction. And while we're busting myths about the first president's head, let's talk about his famous wooden teeth. They weren't wood. The reality is much more gruesome. They were crafted from a horrifying smorgasbord of materials, including ivory, brass screws, and teeth from cows, horses, and, most disturbingly, other humans. The father of the country was built on a foundation of inspiring fables and some deeply unsettling dental work. Number 1. The gladiators who clocked out and went home. Are you not entertained? The image is seared into our minds: 2 men in an arena, fighting to the death, for the amusement of a roaring crowd. The emperor gives the thumbs down, and a life is brutally ended. This was the exception, not the rule. The idea of gladiators constantly fighting to the death is the biggest, most pervasive myth about ancient Rome. The truth is that gladiators were valuable assets. They were expensive investments for their owners. They were like modern prize fighters or star athletes. Killing them off in their first fight would be a terrible business model. Most matches were governed by strict rules and had referees. They often ended when one fighter was wounded first blood or surrendered by raising a finger. Death did happen, but historians estimate the fatality rate was maybe 10–20% per fight at most. The real goal wasn't a glorious death. It was just surviving long enough to fight and get paid another day.